Today we're going to look at operations with rational numbers. Basically, this means we are going to be doing stuff with fractions. So here are some properties of fractions. Equivalent fractions. This is basically saying that if you have fraction equals fraction, you can cross multiply. The only time you can cross multiply is when you have fraction equals fraction. So A times D is going to be equal to B times C. If you have two negatives, a negative on the top and a negative on the bottom, those negatives will cancel each other out, leaving you with a positive number. If you have one negative, it doesn't matter where it is in the fraction, it is still going to create a negative fraction. So a negative in front of the fraction bar is the same as the negative on the top, is the same as the negative on the bottom. To generate equivalent fractions, think of like 2/3. If you want to change that to something over 6, you would have to multiply the top and the bottom by the same thing to get that 4/6. So you're creating an equivalent fraction. 4/6 is equivalent to 2/3 because we multiply the top and the bottom by the same thing. When you're adding fractions, you must have like denominators. So notice here the denominator is the same, and then you add or subtract the tops to create your answer. If you have unlike denominators, you have to get like denominators first before you add or subtract the tops. When you're multiplying, you multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. Division. We don't actually divide fractions. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. You might remember keep, change, flip. So you keep the first fraction the same, you change the sign to multiply, and you flip the second fraction. Then it's a multiplication problem. Multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So perform the operations and simplify. We're going to start out pretty easy. 1/5 minus 4/5. The denominators are the same, so we simply add or subtract at the top. So our denominator is 5. 1 minus 4 is -3. Our answer is -3/5. 3/4 plus 2/5. In this case, the denominators are not the same, so we need to create equivalent fractions that have the same denominator. When you think about 4 and 5, you can multiply those together to get 20. So we want this to be something 20ths plus something 20ths. To get that 4 to become 20, we did 4 times 5, so we need to do 3 times 5 to get 15. To make this 5 become 20, we did 5 times 4, so 2 times 4 is 8. Now we can add those together. 15 20ths plus 8 20ths. 15 plus 8 is 23. So this is 23 20ths. We do need to try to simplify this if we can. And if you know how to use the fraction feature on your calculator, this can be incredibly helpful. But I know that 23 is a prime number, so this is not going to simplify at all, and our answer is 23/20. Multiplication. You multiply straight across the top. 4 times 5 is 20. Straight across the bottom. 3 times 6 is 18. We need to simplify. Now, traditional way to simplify is think about what do 20 and 18 have in common. What's the biggest number that 20 and 18 have in common? And the easiest thing to do is if they're both even, divide by 2. 20 divided by 2 is 10. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And that is the simplified version. If you have a calculator, you can use the fraction feature of your calculator to simplify it. The problem is if you have a plain old scientific calculator, if you do 20 ABC button 18, it's going to give you the answer 1 and 1/9. And we don't really want 1 and 1/9. We want that in improper fraction. But if you push second and then your ABC button again, it will change that answer to an improper fraction, 10/9. So that's a way to use that. So if you have a scientific calculator, that's how you would do that piece. You've gotten your graphing calculator on your student device setup. So here's how you would do this on your student device, or on your graphing calculator on your computer. You do 20 divided by 18. And you can push enter now, but you don't have to. You want to change this to a fraction, to a simplified fraction. Math button, your first option is to fraction, so you push enter and then enter again. And that gives you that simplified fraction in improper fraction form. If you did 20 divided by 18 and got that decimal, you just math button, enter, enter. Anytime you're trying to make something a fraction on the graphing calculator, math button, enter, enter, it puts it as an improper fraction, which is exactly what we want. Okay, division. We don't actually divide. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we keep the first fraction the same, we change the sign to multiply, we flip the second fraction. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, I'll show you on here one more time. 12 divided by 15. I don't need to hit enter, but if you do, that's fine. Math button, enter, enter. 4/5. So this simplified is 4/5. Okay, this is just combining some of the things we've already done. So the first thing I notice in example 3A is that I do not have a common denominator. I see addition and subtraction and not a common denominator. So the first thing we need to do is get a common denominator. And I need to think about what I want that common denominator to be. So we could easily turn this 5 into a 10, but can we easily turn a 10 into a 15 using multiplication? Not really. So think bigger. What's a number that's bigger than 15 that we could do 5 times something to get that number, 10 times something to get that number, and 15 times something to get that number? I like to start with 15 times 2 is 30. Can I make 5 become 30? I think so. So our number that we're going to go for is 30. 5 times 6 is 30. 7 times 6 is 42. To get from 10 to 30, we do times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And to get from 15 to 30, we multiply by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Now we have 42 minus 9 plus 4, that's 37. And our answer is going to be over 30. And you can try to simplify that. I don't think that one simplifies. It does not. So 37/30 is our answer. Now, some of you right now might be saying, hey, if we've got this fancy schmancy calculator, couldn't we just like put this whole thing in? Yeah, you could. In the graphing calculator, you just want to use the division key. So I like to put parentheses around my fractions just to keep them the same or keep them kind of separate. But we have 7/5 minus 3/10 plus 2/15. Change that decimal to a fraction. Our answer is 37/30. Now, on this section, I would like you to do these problems using the properties of fractions, but you can absolutely check yourself by plugging it into your calculator. Okay, division. We don't divide. Instead, we keep the first the same, change the sign to multiply, and flip the second. 2 divided by 1, or 2 firsts, is really just 2. 14 times 2 is 28. All right. Getting into just a few different features. The weird thing about this is that the first one isn't a fraction. We've kind of dealt with this already, but when one of the numbers isn't a fraction, it's just over 1. So you can rewrite it as the number over 1. So this is 8 over 1 times 3 over 6. 8 times 3 is 24. 1 times 6 is 6. When you simplify that, 24 divided by 6 is 4. Okay, we've got 15/16, negative 15/16 times negative 12 fifths. The parentheses are just indicating multiplication. What I notice is that when you do a negative times a negative, it's going to become a positive. So I can just ignore the negatives, honestly. And we can do 15 times 12 on the top, and we can do 16 times 5 on the bottom. Really, we're doing negative 15 times negative 12, which is positive 180. On the bottom, 16 times 5 is 80. And then you can use your calculator. 180 over 80. Simplify that fraction. It is the fraction 9/4. Okay, your assignment is a PDF linked in that Schoology assignment. It starts on page 32, but if you're accessing the PDF on Schoology, it will be just one file that has all of those problems. Make sure you look at what problems it is that you need to do. Make sure you label your assignment. 1.4 book assignment. Even if you just put 1.4 nice and big on the top with like a box around it, that would be sufficient to let me know that what you're currently working on that page is section 1.4.